Hello and welcome to the 16th episode of Born in Quarantine. Part of being in quarantine is watching contemporary television. I watched Mythic Quest. It was kind of mythical. I watched I'm Not Okay With This, and I wasn't okay with it. I watched Space Force, and it was so forgettable that I think I already forgot about it. But then I watched Hunters, and yes, this episode is going to be about Hunters. It's the triumphant return of Batman Mark. Yes, we finally have him back. To be honest, today's episode was going to be about something different. I was going to talk about a Batman animated movie called Under the Red Hood. But if you want to make the gods laugh, make plans. Ha ha ha. No, seriously, one day I might talk about Batman animated stuff. It's on the agenda, but this one needs to be talked about. Here on Born in Quarantine, I think we talk about a lot of past things. Even the newest stuff we talk about happened in 2019. And it's not a very healthy outlook because there are a lot of stuff that I need to watch, both from 2019 and released in 2020. I want to watch them, and for some reason I think because in the times of uncertainty we tend to stick with stuff that we feel comfortable about, and watching new movies, experiencing new movies is something that is generally uncomfortable. It can be risky, so we tend to not do that. I say we. I tend to not do that. But I am trying to lean myself into newer stuff because, you can't run away from them and you need to watch them, especially if you're me and cinema is a big part of your life. So I started, with the usual dipping the toe in the pool. I started with TV shows. I said, well, I lean myself into more newer stuff and don't watch a lot of old stuff. I watched Mythic Quest. I think it's okay. It's not the best show out there, but it's quite harmless. I watched Space Force. Again, quite harmless, very mediocre. I watched Little America. The 7th episode was practically made for people like me. It was about an Iranian immigrant. The rest, I really have nothing to say because I don't live in the US. And I watched I'm Not Okay With This, and it's not a good show. It's repetitive. Have you seen The End of the Fucking World? You've seen I'm Not Okay With This. Have you seen any teen movie from 80s? You've seen I'm Not Okay With This. Actually, for my Persian-speaking viewers, a friend of mine wrote an essay about it. I'm going to put the link in the description. Check it out. I think it's a good read. Then I watched Hunters. Hunters really grabbed my attention because it had Al Pacino, which is an actor I really love, and it had that code word that is programmed in my brain, World War II. And I thought, well, I need to watch this show. What is it about? And I did. But before we get to Hunters, let's talk about something else, something important though. Nazisploitation. To put it very mildly, the understatement of the century is that Nazis were pretty bad people. When you look at history books, they are cartoonishly evil. They are the kind of evil that you realize, how can one be like that? They were crazy, they were immoral, they were manic. And the result of that was sort of a mystification because we couldn't fathom people can be this evil, and so we sort of get fascinated with them. There is a song by Golden Smog called Walk Where He Walked that is just about this. people are fascinated with sociopaths and psychopaths and murderers and generally evil people. And when you want evil and you want organized evil, look no further than Nazi Germany. But what is the result of that mysticism that surrounds them? They did a lot of human testing. As I said, they were immoral. So could they be testing these weird theories? And what if those weird theories worked? So you have stuff like Boys from Brazil, which is about cloning technology made by Nazis. No one else would do it but Nazis. Why? Because Nazis were immoral enough to subject humans to these unfair conditions. So you have that, and then you add to that the other part of human, mind that is generally pretty fucked up. You add sexualization to that, and you have Nazi exploitation or Nazisploitation. I mean, not all of the Nazisploitation movies are bad. I mean, Salo is technically a Nazisploitation movie. Salon Kitty is definitely a Nazisploitation movie. Ilsa, the werewolf of SS, is probably one of the most famous Nazisploitation movies, but that is the general idea in all of them. Nazis, immorality, and human sexuality. They are matching together and creating stuff that I cannot put in this corner because they are not suitable for YouTube. But Nazisploitation is actually a result of that mysticism. You look at Nazis and you think these wild people, these immoral people, what are they capable of? They had a lot of plots. They have the misfortune of being entangled with German engineering and German punctuality, so they are always plotting. They are these monsters with always something in their sleeves. And you know what kind of villains work best in B-movies? I've talked about B-movies before in the Guns of Apocalypse, and I talked about B-movies villains. Villains in B-movies are usually larger than life. They're big, they are cynical, they're complicated, they are weird. And guess what? Nazis make the perfect over-the-top villain. A, they believe in over-the-top ideologies that is immoral in its core. B, they do not have any sort of compassion, so they will do crazy stuff that create monsters that our heroes need to fight. C, due to their immoral stuff, a lot of people actively try to not read into them, so they will be more believable. So Nazis make the best B-movie villains. To many storytellers, they will become a great asset. The Major, which is one of my favorite characters from the anime Hellsing, which I already talked about, and if you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, anywhere, you probably have seen his face because, he's one of my favorite characters, and he's also a fat guy, so I chose him. But he's a Nazi, and he's a good villain that is taken from that Nazi mysticism and mixed with a B-movie vibe. And the good thing about B-movies and Nazisploitation movies and general stories about Nazis is that your limit is your imagination. You can tell they have zeppelins and landed on the moon and create Iron Sky. An amazing B-movie which I again urge you to definitely watch. You can tell they were cloning Hitler, and all this time they wanted to create the new Hitler, and you have the Boys from Brazil. Great movie, by the way. One of the best performances of Laurence Olivier is from that movie. You can say they were running sex camps and they were engaging in sexual misconduct just because they could. And you have Salon Kitty, which is from Tinto Brass, a man. I will talk about him if you want, but please don't make me talk about Tinto Brass. So you have this amazing gold mine of villainy, but what about the other side? To all of us, Nazis are these cartoonish villains, but to many people who were suffering from Holocaust, these cartoonish villains were the stuff of their nightmares. To most of us, that swastika is probably a symbol of bad villainy and maybe overused cliche, but to a lot of people that was probably some of the horrific imagery that they had to endure. So as you see, there is also a lot of good stories to be said in that regard. You have the amazing Schindler List, which it's a great movie. You have the massively underrated and massively breathtaking Life is Beautiful, which is just amazing. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch that movie. So you have both sides that are great gold mines of good storytelling. One in a more schlocky way, and one in a more emotional and somewhat terrifying way. So you would think, what would happen if we mix these two? You would think it would create something good, right? Let's talk about Hunters. For those of you who don't know, Hunters is a TV show starring Al Pacino, Dylan Baker, that boy from Percy Jackson, and that guy from Frasier, and Ted from How I Met Your Mother with a mustache. Now, Hunters is about this group of ragtag people. I don't know what to call them. They are this group that actively hunt and execute Nazis that are hiding in America in the 1970s. So these people, some of them Holocaust survivors and people who actually seen people in the camps, they all go and, well, they try to kill these Nazis. Sort of a judge, jury, and executioner thing. It's very much reminiscent of Avengers, but if the Avengers were hunting Nazis instead of Thanos. I'm not just saying that though either. The show is definitely trying to make you make that connection because they talk about superheroes a lot. They talk about comic books, superheroes, Batman, Spider-Man.
Well, you know, they said the same thing about Spider-Man. And Jean Grey. And Dick Grayson. You know, until they killed the motherfucking big bad.
And prove themselves.
And yes, as I said that, I realized that was a very wasted opportunity to not point at my Batman mark, but the show wants you to make that connection. I don't know what is the deal with Amazon Prime trying to deconstruct the superhero myth, but please bring back Tick. Tick was so good and I already miss him. So Hunters follows this group and there is this weird stylized thing to it. Doesn't really have a style, but it wants to. It wants to be sort of postmodernist, fun. Like, oh, how about we do it if the scene where they introduce each character was like a movie poster for each one. It's fun and it's definitely a good style. But then there is the Holocaust scenes, which are incredibly down and real and horrifying. You see these moments from Holocaust that people are tortured and removed from their loved one. The kids are being killed. The loves that are lost. The lives that are lost. It's just so breaking. And so, but the Nazi killing aspect actually acts like sort of a B-movie. They are finding these Nazis, giving them, well, ironic deaths. And you think that would work because, well, you have the greatest villains and you have some of the heartbreaking, emotional stories of the last century together, but no, it doesn't. Why it doesn't? Okay, I'm going to be honest. I don't care about spoilers most of the time, and I've spoiled things on this show a lot. But this is a show that is relatively new, and I don't want to spoil it. So if you don't want to hear this next part, because I talk about the very last episode, because that is a very important part. If you don't want to hear any spoilers that might ruin the show for you, jump to this time code. On the last episode of the show, on the very last episode, on the last scene of that last episode, we are taken to Argentina and we have a character which we've seen throughout the show called the Colonel. And then there is this old guy coming, played by that guy from 2001 A Space Odyssey. and you think, oh, who is this going to be? At first I thought, oh, it's going to be Joseph Mengele. Is it going to be Adolf Eichmann? I was close. It was Adolf Hitler.
Ich bin so hungry.
Hitler was alive, and that girl, she was Eva Braun. Oh my God, that is the most stupid thing possible that you could have done with this show. Don't get me wrong, a bunch of Nazi killers in 1970s going after Nazi officials and then going to fight Hitler is an amazing B-movie. I would definitely watch that. I would have a lot of fun. I would definitely recommend it to my friends. We would sit and we would get excited and cheer for them and eat popcorn, but not in this show. Why? Because if we spend 10 hours being downers about Holocaust, about these horrific things that happen to people, horrifying and downer, and you brought us 10 hours to go to it, to reach the place where Hitler is alive. What the fuck? I'm not mad at the show for disrespecting the Holocaust memories, which is a good reason to be mad at the show. I am mad at the show because if this is where you wanted to end up, why didn't we have fun? Why wasn't we busting skulls, why wasn't we watching Inglourious Bastards? You see what I mean when I say it doesn't mix well? You had a B-movie idea, an amazing B-movie idea, let me tell you, because Al Pacino is great, and there is actually a twist which I don't mind as much, even though it is a stupid twist, but I don't mind as much about the Al Pacino character. It just comes out of nowhere. A bad twist in writing, not a bad twist in theory. And you have this ragtag group, you have an actor who has problems in the 70s, so you have that fun angle. You have this Black Panther girl, which again another staple of 70s, which could be fun in its own right when he's compared to the Nazis, because Nazis weren't only against Jews, they were against gay people, black people, a lot of people. And so yeah, this is fun. This is all fun stuff. This is good storytelling. Not serious storytelling, but good storytelling nonetheless. Not everything needs to be downer and serious and evoking memories and emotion. No, sometimes you just need to have fun, and there is nothing wrong with that. But no, you brought us 10 hours of downer stuff just to reach a place where fucking Hitler is alive. I'm sorry, this really annoys me, because there is this other problem. People take themselves a little bit too seriously, in my opinion. Not every show is going to be a message-filled political statement. Not every show needs to be the loudest voice. We don't need big statements to have fun. You want to tell a big statement, tell it through your story. And Hunters takes itself way too seriously for what is basically a B-movie premise. You want to talk about how forgiving people are of the Nazi crimes simply because they weren't there to witness it or experience it. I truly understand that is a very valid point to make. But why not make it through your fun story? Let me talk about this scene, which I think is actually encapsulates almost all of the problems I have with the show. There is this scene, which is a cutaway scene. It's a postmodernist gimmick, where it's a game show that why nobody cares about the Jews. Okay, let's see what you're doing. Okay, you are making the same stereotypes that people often regard Jews with. Okay, I get your point. You're right. I need to look at myself and realize, do we all look at a certain creed, a certain ethnicity like that simply because we've realized all of these stereotypes to be true? Thank you, Hunters. You've given me something to look for through a very quite funny and postmodernist idea. But no, for some reason, Hunters think we are all idiots. So we have this.
Do you know someone who would win big money here? Have them apply today. No, really. Do you? Maybe a parent, a friend, your husband or wife, Maybe they play it often, around the kitchen table, or at work, maybe just in the safety of their own minds. Because
Thank you. I got that. I got that before you say it. Don't treat people like idiots. When you do it like this, you don't come off as I have a message. You come off as I have a preach. And I am going to preach it to you, all those stupid masses who may not have realized this if I hadn't told you. Do you want to know how boring, uninteresting, and stupid it would be if all movies treated us like this? I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. Just realize how dangerous I am. I am going to make these people something that they can't refuse. Not because they can't refuse, they can refuse. But if they do refuse, I'm going to do stuff to them. I'm going to hurt them. I may not hurt them physically, but I will hurt them emotionally. I will attack them where they are the most vulnerable. Yes, I'm going to make them an offer they can't refuse. And when you take yourself that seriously and you want to have a message, then why not go all the way? It's time for part 3. The show is actually a very good drama. Something that makes me mad is that you could have gone either way and given us a good show. You didn't. You wanted both. You wanted your cake and you wanted to eat it. And the result is frustrating. In the second episode, it's a minor spoiler, it's a second episode. This guy, a Nazi, tells our main character that when you kill someone, you hear a ringing and it doesn't go away.
That is why I made them sing. To drown it out. The ringing. So I could hear the music again.
At first it seems the show is doing something with it. When they kill this Nazi, our main character starts hearing the ringing and it drives him mad, and he sort of realizes what makes a killer go nuts. Basically, it would have been a good idea. These Nazis, as much as we call them evil, and they were evil, they were human. What makes them go like that? The show has a quite good idea. You kill the first one because you're ordered to, then you go mad because, well, you killed someone. It's not an easy thing to do. Guess what? It doesn't go anywhere. By the next episode, they've already forgotten about it. And it's sad because it would have been a very interesting story. I would have loved to see where this story would go. But no, we need to make room for more Holocaust stuff and more B-movie ideas, even though we had a good idea that we could have expanded upon. That would include your Holocaust ideology, incredibly good. And your B-movie villains, incredibly good too. So yeah, I am mad at Hunters, not because it has an agenda. Every show has an agenda. Most of the shows that has an agenda just don't bother me anymore. Mythic Quest doesn't bother me, even though it's a blatant ad for Ubisoft. Space Force doesn't bother me, even though its whole existence is a meme. But Hunters bothers me because I spent more than 10. The first episode was an hour and a half, 10.5 hours watching you. And you couldn't decide if you wanted to give me an emotional feeling about the Holocaust or a B-movie fun adventure? Fuck you. Writing basically a 10.5 hour movie is not easy. It's going to take a lot of focus and a lot of talent and a lot of skill. And it needs a lot of rewrites. You go out and say, oh my god, this ringing thing. This is a good idea. Maybe we should expand that. Or no, this ringing thing. Well, it doesn't fit in with the rest, and you kind of let it go. Okay, let's remove that. But no, it seems like they were writing it episode by episode without ever looking back at what happened. There is not yet a second season announced, and it is weird since Amazon. So it tells me that Hunters is probably in some deep water. And no, the irony of me preaching you about not preaching people is not lost on me. So, if that worked, if this worked, and if that, my computer worked, I will see you again next week.
Thank you.